want to thank the last speaker for his speech and ask Dr. Mark Humphrys to approach the podium. Hear, hear.
Madam Auditor, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for the invite. I'm an atheist, so as a result I think the last speaker would say my opinions on Islam are completely worthless. I'd like to reassure him that at least I'm not gay. So let's get started, and we will, otherwise he'd really dislike me.
I said I don't dislike gays.
All right.
That's the problem.
We'll get into that later. I'm not gay, but I think gays deserve the right to live their own lives in peace in whatever country in the world they happen to find themselves. Now, no claps for that, I see. Let me get back to addressing the motion. Now, in one sense, this motion is a really interesting question. It is the question of the age. And in one sense, this motion is absolutely obviously false. Nobody I talked to about this motion thought, oh, that's a really strange topic for debate. Islam is a religion. And they thought, I never thought about that. Oh, yeah, Islam violence. There was some incident one time. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Fascinating. Nobody thought that. Instead, they expressed concern for my safety. So everybody knows that Islam has a problem with violence, and that's why we're here. Now, in case you don't read the newspapers, I'm just going to give you a very quick list. So my plan in this speech is to really depress you to begin with, and then to kind of cheer you up at the end with an optimism that you mightn't see coming. Okay, so hopefully let's see that I'll succeed. We had 9/11, then we had the shoe bomber, we had the LA airport attacks. If you don't know these things, go Google them up and have a look at them. The Beltway sniper, the Madrid train bombings, we had the 7/7 London bombings, the 21/7. Follow up to those, the Seattle Jewish Center attack. That was just under Bush. Then under Obama, we had the Boston Marathon, Little Rock, Fort Hood, Flight 253, that was the underpants bomber, if you remember him. The Toulouse massacre, which is absolutely disgusting. The Times Square bombing attempt, the Frankfurt airport shooting, the Charlie Hebdo arson attack, the Bulgaria bus bombing, the Woolwich near beheading, and the Jewish Museum shooting, and lots more to come before Obama leaves office. Before 9/11, I won't depress you with the whole list. There was the first World Trade Center bombing, the Brooklyn Bridge, the French metro bombings, the Salman Rushdie attacks and killings where they burnt down a hotel, if you remember as well as that. All of this, you'll notice, is just within the West, and I've left out a ton of them. A tiny sample, I've left out all of the Islamic terror attacks in Israel, in Russia, in India. These are only recent attacks and only in the West. Outside the West, we can start talking about Boko Haram, who the people started paying attention to this year, but of course they've been slaughtering Christians in Nigeria for years and years, for about 7 years now. We can talk about ISIS, and before that the Iraqi jihadis and the Syrian jihadis of different stripes. The Algerian jihad, does anybody remember all the village slaughters in the 1990s in Algeria? Is this all swept onto the carpet? Al-Shabaab in Somalia, who kill apostates and people who watch the World Cup. The Afghan Taliban, the Pakistani Taliban, who were slaughtering at girls' schools, at primary schools. They've had chemical attacks on girls' schools in Pakistan and Afghanistan. And then the state killing by countries like Iran and Sudan. Now, nor do we talk about the past. So our ancestors 100 years ago, as Oliver, the first speaker there, said, were well aware, had a kind of view of Islam as a violent religion, and that's because of the endless violence between Islam and the West, going right back to the start of Islam. So we had the Armenian genocide, for example, the genocide and expulsion of all non-Muslims from Turkey. And Turkey itself, of course, had been conquered by Islam, as you all well know. It was 90% Christian when it was conquered by Islam by the sword. And our ancestors were well aware of all of this. Now, I'm not going to defend Christianity. We've got a bunch of atheists here. The Christians aren't here to defend themselves. And in fact, the thing about modern Christians is they probably wouldn't defend 1400 Christianity anyway. Anyway, if you want defense of Christianity, you're in the wrong place, because it's not going to come tonight. But we're talking about Islam. And so before that you had the forced conversion of Turkey by warfare. Before that you had the conquest of Spain, and of course the conquest of Christian North Africa and the Christian Middle East. So what has happened is that there has been an ocean of blood for 1,400 years So I told you I was going to depress you. Are there any good things coming? Well, there are good things coming. But let me just tell you, a chap called Bill Warner has at least attempted to put numbers in all this. I haven't talked about the Hindus. Tens of millions of Hindus killed on what you might call the Eastern Front. Bill Warner estimates that Islam has killed 270 million people over 1,400 years. And that's more than communism. I thought communism was the top killer. According to Bill Warner, Islam is the greatest killer of all time in the history of the world. Now, he might be right, his numbers might be too high, but the fact is there is an ocean of blood there caused by Islam, and one caused by Christianity, and one caused by communism, etc. I agree with that. But the idea that Islam, for 1,400 years, has been a religion of peace is comically false. So, is there anything to debate? I should just sit down now. At this point, I've improved the point, and not push it any further by trying to attempt some other argument. I'm going to attempt something, which is, what does this ocean of blood have to do with most Muslims? And what does this ocean of blood have to do with the religion itself? So I'm going to attempt a couple of things, and they won't be exactly nice answers that make everyone. I'm not here to make everybody feel happy. So, are most Muslims jihadists? Well, of course they're not. Most Muslims around the world, and 1.6 billion of them, as somebody mentioned, they want to live life, they want to bring up their family, they want their kids to go to school, and they want to be able to afford a reasonable house and a car or whatever. And that's great. And in the history of the world, it's often the people who stay home are the heroes. And the people who go out with ideas are actually quite often the villains. So it is ideas that put people into gas chambers. If you're selfish and hedonistic and stay home and watch TV, you won't be putting people into gas chambers. It's because you believe in some kind of ridiculous load of nonsense that you end up chemically bombing girls' schools in Pakistan, or putting kids in gas chambers in Poland. So most Muslims stay home. Now, but do they support the jihadis in principle, or at least rhetorically, or from the comfort of their armchair? Well, obviously not 100%. That's obviously true, but so what? Is it 1%? Now, so here we need to turn to opinion polls, and I've got a bunch of opinion polls which I'll have to speed through a few, and they're mixed, and that's my message. The message on this is mixed. It's not necessarily happy clappy, it is mixed. In the year 2000, this is before 9/11, 73% of Palestinians supported suicide attacks against America, not against Israel, against probably more against Israel, but against America. This is before 9/11. After 9/11, 2002, 52% of Egyptians supported 9/11 in 2002. So these are majorities. I'm not even talking about the countries. So there's 30% support for 9/11 or 40%. We can find countries with majority support. In 2004, the majority in Jordan and Morocco, the majority of the population supported suicide bombing of the Jews of Israel. In 2006, 40% of Indonesian Muslims would use violence against those blaspheming Islam. The numbers go on. They're not necessarily that good. There's 20% here, 30% there, 40%. 51% of Jordanians support Hezbollah, 56% support Hamas. 54% of Nigerians support bin Laden. That's 2010, 2013, 35% of Palestinians support Al-Qaeda. So, jihadism is not a lunatic fringe. The message that I'm giving you is that jihadism is one very mainstream interpretation of Islam. It might be a terrible interpretation according to some people, and that's great. I certainly hope most people agree it's a terrible interpretation, but it's mainstream and it goes right back to the start of Islam, and it is supported by, let us say, 20% of all Muslims, so 300 million people. Okay? So remember, it's 300 million. It's not 1.6 billion. So don't say it's 1.6 billion. If anybody does, nobody does that I know of. But let's not say it's 300,000, because that's not true either. It's more like 300 million. So a bit depressing, a bit dark. The second thing is, does it have anything to do with the religion of Islam? Here, I think the answer is also somewhat depressing, because of course it does. Where else do you think these people get these ideas? The Boko Harams and the Taliban and all that. As far as they're concerned, it's a lot to do with the religion of Islam. It is Islam. It's not even just a political movement based on Islam. It's Islam itself. So all of these groups, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, the 9/11 bombers, the 7/7, all of these people are getting their inspiration from a particular reading of the religion of Islam, and a reading that I'm here to say is very mainstream, and that's our big problem. It's not tiny fringes. There's the disturbing question of would the Prophet Muhammad approve of this. Now, I am going to go out on a limb here and suggest that he probably would. I think the Prophet Muhammad would not necessarily have a problem with violence. Even his admirers, I'm sure plenty of his admirers here, would have to agree that he was involved in a huge amount of warfare, violence and assassinations in the last 10 years. I'll just give you one example, which is the slaughter of the Jews of the Banu Qurayza, I don't know if I pronounced that right, where he beheaded all the males and took the females captive as booty, and children were sold into slavery. Now, this was just one particular event, but there were a huge number of other violent acts. There were assassinations of critics and so on. So I think, not having any particular great following for the religion of Islam or any other religion, I think the idea that Muhammad would disapprove of Al-Qaeda certainly would have to remain unproven. So I'm painting an absolutely miserable picture. 300 million people support jihad. It's firmly rooted in Islam. Muhammad would probably approve. It's been going on for 1,400 years. Is there any hope? I'm going to give you three things where I think that there is hope. And the first one is that you may not predict what I'm about to say. The first one is that religions do not have to be logical. Religions do not have to follow their founders. Now, what do I mean by this? Religions don't have to be logical. Well, again, I think there is no religion that is based on logic and evidence. If you're into logic and evidence, you've been to science and atheism. Religions are based on faith, which is a belief in things that can't really be justified by the standard methods of logic and evidence. So I'll give you a quick example based on attacking Moses, of all people, which is in Numbers 31 when Moses ordered all the rapes, right? You know all that? In Numbers 31 when Moses said, "You didn't rape those women, I'm annoyed with you." Right? No, you don't know it because Christians and Jews don't talk about it, right? And that's a good thing. Christians and Jews don't talk about it because it's kind of embarrassing what Moses said in Numbers 31. He was angry with his army for not raping all the women. They were the Midianites. I can give you the whole thing later, but I'm running out of time. So, Christians and Jews claim to follow Moses, but they don't follow that. In fact, nobody follows Moses. So how do religions do that? It's because they are irrational. They found some kind of way, theologically, to say that this is where they came from, this is the tradition they came from, but they don't follow it at all. In fact, I think Moses would be horrified if he came down to earth and saw what Christianity and Judaism is. He'd want to have killed Jesus, for example. He'd have agreed with the crucifixion. So can Islam do this? I think that it's already happening, but the people I see doing it are the Ahmadis, who've started up a mosque here in Galway. Now, the Ahmadis are great. There have been 24,000 Islamic terrorist attacks in history. No, since 2001, since 9/11. There have been 24,000 Islamic terrorist attacks. As far as I know, and you can correct me, not a single one was done by an Ahmadi Muslim. So the Ahmadi Muslims, and they deserve a round of applause for that, to be honest, but the Ahmadi Muslims have a theological belief that any kind of justice needs to be implemented in the next life or whatever. Now, I don't believe in next lives or whatever, but whatever gets them through the day is brilliant. The Ahmadis are much to be admired. Whatever they want to believe, if that's what they believe, we can all live with them. Let me tell you one thing. If every Muslim in the world was an Ahmadi Muslim, there would be no terrorism. So think about that. None of those groups would exist that I have talked about. Now, I'm going to now annoy the Ahmadi Muslims, and I've annoyed the chair because I've gone on too long, by saying that if Muhammad came back to life, he might improve with them, but it doesn't matter. So, what is my optimism for the future? My optimism is that Islam will evolve in the direction that the Ahmadis show, that violence or whatever is symbolic or should be put in the past, and justice is for Allah, and whatever. They can come up with some theological fudge, you might like, or new argument, if you prefer that, to make it all good and make it that we are going to be peaceful, we aren't going to persecute gays, we aren't going to persecute apostates, we aren't going to persecute blasphemers. Allah will sort all that out. Now, that's what I want to see. Is it going to happen? I just say it could happen, and the great example of why it could happen is Christianity. Because if I was saying any of the stuff I've been saying, in 1500 AD in Galway, I'd been taken out and burnt to the stake as an atheist, as a heretic, as a blasphemer, as a dissenter. So how on earth did Christianity change from that? The fact is, religions change over hundreds of years, and they can become the opposite of what they used to be because they're not based on logic. So I have a hope that this will happen. I'll have to tell you the reasons why I do have some hope. Most counter-jihadists have no hope at all that the world will get any better. They think it's all going to get worse. I do have some hope, but I'm kind of out of time, but I'm just raising the possibility that in the long run, maybe not in our lifetimes, but in 100 to 200 years, Islam will be entirely like Ahmadi Islam. Thank you.